Now let's talk about operations with complex numbers. Suppose we have complex number z1, which is a plus bi, and another complex number z2, which is c plus di. Now, what happens if we add z1 and z2? z1 plus z2, which means we are adding a plus bi with c plus di. Now think of this, a complex number is made of two parts, a real part, and this also has real part. This is real part of z2, this is real part of z1, and it has an imaginary part. This is the imaginary part of the complex number z1, and this is the imaginary part of the complex number z2. Think of this real and imaginary parts as two different things. The real part could be apples and imaginary part is oranges. So when you are adding two complex numbers, you add the apples with the apples. That means you add the real part with the real part, and you add the oranges with the oranges. That means you add the imaginary part with the imaginary part. So the addition of two complex numbers is essentially the addition of its real parts and the addition of its imaginary parts, a plus b plus c plus di. For example, if z1 is 2 plus 3i and z2 is 6 minus 7i, then z1 plus z2 is 2 plus 6 plus 3 minus 7i. And that gives us 8 minus 4i. Now, subtraction of complex numbers is similar also. When you subtract two complex numbers, you subtract the real part with the real part. So a minus c plus b minus di. Now, if you were to take the same example of z1 as 2 plus 3i and z2 as 6 minus 7i, then what will be z1 minus z2? 2 plus 3i minus 6 minus 7i. We subtract the real part with the real part, so it becomes 2 minus 6. And we subtract the imaginary part with the imaginary part. 3i minus 7i. And that gives us minus 4 plus 3 minus 7, which is 10i. Next, let's talk about the third operation on complex number, which is multiplication of two complex numbers. So, if we multiply two complex numbers, z1 multiplied with z2, then, as we have seen in an earlier video, a plus bi multiplied with c plus di. We use the same method as we use for any other algebraic product of algebraic polynomials. A multiplied with c, and then a multiplied with di, bi multiplied with c, so we get bci, and bi multiplied with di, and we get bdi square. And remember, I square is -1, so this part becomes negative bd. So the result of this complex multiplication of these two complex numbers is ac minus bd plus ad plus bci. Now, using the same example that we took earlier, if we have 2 plus 3i and we multiply it with 6 minus 7i, what we get is 2 times 6, which is 12, minus 2 times 7i, which is 14i, plus 6 times 3i, that's 18i, and minus 7 times 3, 21i squared. And again, I square is -1. So this becomes 12 plus 27, this is my real part, and plus 4i, this is the imaginary part. So the result of this, of multiplying these two complex numbers, is 12 plus 27, which is 39, plus 4i.